So I am delighted to introduce Jenny Liang to you today. Jenny is a design strategist who specializes in helping teams design humanistic technologies, and I'm sure she'll explain what that means. She leads teams to understand people's needs and values and then design empathetic, viable solutions. Her projects range from advising a software company on how to use algorithms to ethically drive behavior to leading empathetic influence workshops. She's passionate about sharing her knowledge. She's taught design thinking at Otis College of Art and Design, USC, at many conferences, including TED at UCLA. Jenny uses her empathic skills to counsel callers at the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. She started her career as a scientist, graduating with honors from UC Berkeley in plant biology, and she holds an MS in industrial design from the Art Center College of Design. So please join me in welcoming Jenny Liang.
Thank you. Let me get this thing in my pocket. Okay. Thank you so much for having me here, guys. I'm so pleased to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that's empathy. And it's something that I think can really be tapped into to come up with better ideas. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So we'll start with an introduction to what empathy means and how the context that it's in right now. Then we'll go through some techniques to cultivate our empathy. And then once we cultivate our empathy, we'll talk about some tools that we can use to put that to work, how we frame up our problems, and then coming up with how all of this comes together to create engaging experiences. So this is what we'll be doing today, and it'll wrap up in talking about how to design engaging experiences. So at the heart of it, empathy, it's really simple. Empathy is basically just understanding what someone else is feeling. You know, and we all do this in our lives. And there are two kinds of empathy. There's affective empathy and cognitive empathy. And affective empathy is the kind of empathy that you feel in your gut. And cognitive empathy is understanding what someone's feeling, kind of more as a concept on a cerebral level. So if I were to say to you, hey, my brother, he just got kicked really hard in the groin. Maybe some of the men in the room might have more affective empathy for my brother, and the women in the room might have more cognitive empathy, and it's more conceptual. So that's the two kinds of empathy, and we work on, I try and help people do both kinds. So a little bit of context around the word empathy. Right now we're in a time where the term empathy, it's a little bit of a lightning rod. So with our current administration and like all this talk about race relationship, like you hear the word empathy and it kind of holds this representation of like the opposite of the sensibilities that are in power right now. And it's like the solution to many things. And another context in his book Against Empathy, Paul Bloom talks about it as like, you know, the opposite of being rational and losing all of your judgment to think if you understand how somebody feels. And then there's lots of definitions about empathy that talk about it as being a doormat or being too afraid to criticize someone or being afraid to speak in terms of hurting someone's feelings. Like, it's got a lot of baggage and right now. And I like to think about empathy more in this context. The connotations I like to put around it are Krista Tippett. Actually, all these three qualities of absorbing different perspectives, making meaningful content once you've understood those perspectives, and then using that content to influence things for the better. So I think there's three examples that I find really inspiring in ways that this is done. So the first is Krista Tippett. She's a journalist that is now the CEO of a big media company called the On Being Project. And she just interviews people of different faith and religion and from all different walks of life and talks to them about what they care about. And then she takes what she finds and then shares their wisdom with the world. So she's really trying to learn all of these different ways. And then there's Fred Rogers, who created Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's somebody who, you know, really would try and understand the needs of children and then made content to try and help them live to be more resilient and wise as they grew up. And here, if you haven't seen this video of him talking about his work to Congress. I really recommend you take a look at it. So this is a picture of him, and he's facing Congress, and all of PBS's funding is about to get cut for about $20 million. And everybody's feeling really skeptical about keeping PBS, and he goes up there and he says, you know, I work with children. I wrote this song that was based on what one child told me about how difficult it is to manage my feelings. And he read those words to Congress, and in an instant, everybody in that room understood that he had this like amazing gift to really understand children and connect with them in a way that was going to help them grow up to be better people and then a better society. And so I thought that was really a powerful way to show that empathy can really make a difference. And then as you might have heard earlier, I also work as a crisis counselor on a suicide hotline. So in your context, counselor might mean like academic advising, but this is more in the mental health context, where when people feel suicidal, they call this line and they say, you know, I'm feeling really down. And what I do as a counselor is I empathize with them, and I try and understand what they're going through and then validate what they're going through. And that process of empathizing with them helps them like trust me and to give them recommendations to do something that might be a little more constructive than what they're thinking of right now. And so I think when you hear the word empathy, there's all these connotations of like powerlessness, but I think in my experience and in the people that I admire, I see that being empathetic is not only very inspiring, it can also be something that's really powerful in shaping your influence in the world. So these are the roles that I've played where empathy is really central to my practice. So I mentioned I'm a crisis counselor. I also work as a design researcher, so that means I interview people about what they want out of a product and service, and then advise my teams on how to design that product and service in a way that really resonates with them. So as a design strategist, I not only think about what works for the user, I also think about what works for the company in the current context that they're in. And then I've been working a lot more with interdisciplinary teams, and you guys probably know this because you're all sitting in cross-functional groups right now. You know, everybody brings a certain perspective, and the farther apart those perspectives are, the more challenging it can be to work with people. And so being empathetic to a range of different perspectives really helps me find the overlaps so teams can work together. And across all of these roles, I've found that I can use my empathy to get these different benefits, being more collaborative with people, getting more insight from the interviews I have, being more inspired and finding ideas that I might not have thought of on my own if I were just looking at things from my own perspective. And then in designing tech, the thing Shelley asked me to explain, you know, if I'm designing like a chatbot or some digital notification, I can use that knowledge of what it's like and what people are experiencing to make sure it feels more warm and less creepy. So actually, some of my most exciting work has been to actually codify what it means to not be creepy and what that means, and create design guidelines around that. So that's a whole nother talk. So I hope over the next 2 days, some of the things I share with you in the next hour can help you, give you some of these benefits as well. So let's start. Let's talk about how we can cultivate our empathy to be more empathetic. The first thing is really simple. It's just to observe. I often say I'm usually listening more with my eyes than I am with my ears. And that's because people are just really emanating what they feel at any time. You just have to notice it. And so if you look at this picture, this is a picture of Nicole Kidman telling Jimmy Fallon that she used to have a crush on him and she didn't know why he didn't reciprocate. And, and I mean, just from what you see, you can kind of guess that Jimmy Fallon is not too delighted by what he's hearing. He's a little mortified. And you can't hear their tone of voice. You don't even see what they're saying over time. You just see this one still picture. But already you can observe so much about what's going on. You can see Jimmy Fallon's mortified. He's so mortified he can't take in the sight of her. He has to cover his eyes. You can see, and he's like really small and scrunched down. You can see Nicole Kidman. She's in a really protective posture, and she's all protected. Her hand is open in this exasperated gesture. And her mouth, she's like talking about the story where she seems really surprised, right? So you can see a lot that's going on. And I'm looking across all of you guys. I'm like pleased to see that you're paying attention, you know. And so to break this down a little, you know, you can look at someone's face and see. We are hardwired to see, to read emotion. It's just something we've been built to do. There was a psychologist in the 60s named Paul Ekman who went around with pictures of people and having faces like this and showed them all corners of the world. And he found that the human face has these universal patterns of muscle contractions that happen when you are feeling a certain emotion. And so he went through and coded all the little muscles and showed which combinations you show. And so when you're upset. And so, you know, even though we feel this viscerally and instinctually, I find it really helpful to know kind of the patterns to watch out for. So if it happens really fast or really subtly, I can look it out and get that much more confirmation of what I'm sensing intuitively. So that's facial cues. And then postural cues too, how people sit. So you remember we saw Nicole Kidman, really tightly wound and protective. That was something that I was looking at, and you can see the range of how people hold their bodies is really representing what they feel. So tight is being protective. And then here, I like this picture. It's really showing that people are at ease, and they kind of like each other. They have the same mirrored posture. They're kind of mirroring each other, and their bodies are open. So this is a whole nother way, too, that you can think of. Actually, back to this, there's this, do you guys know who Alan Alda is? So he wrote a book on empathy, and he was really interested in trying to cultivate his empathy. And he said that he wanted to, he tried an experiment where he took an empathy test, like trying to evaluate different faces. And then for a certain amount of time, he just walked around the world, and every single face he saw, he tried to label that emotion, to take what we do unconsciously and make it conscious. And so once he did that, for a certain amount of time, he found that his scores on empathy really improved. So if you're consciously making an effort to notice these things, it really does help your skill to be more empathetic. So let's do a little practice. This is Marion Jones. She is an Olympic athlete who was caught taking steroids, and she's apologizing to the media here. Based on what you guys see and what I've just told you, what are you guys noticing about her and thinking about what she might be feeling right now?
Regret.
Regret, yep. How can you tell?
Why don't you clear the eyes in the function?
You're a quick learner, yep. That's great. Yep. So you can see, like, there's some tells about what she's going through. You can see her tears. You can see the sides of our eyes. They're a little bit down. Now, let's watch a video of this.
Making these false statements to federal agents was an incredibly stupid thing for me to do. And I am responsible fully for my actions. I have no one to blame but myself for what I have done. To you, my fans, including my young supporters, the United States Track and Field Association, my closest friends, my attorneys, and the most classy family a person could ever hope for, namely my mother, my husband, my children, my brother and his family, my uncle, and the rest of my extended family, I want you to know that I have been dishonest. And you have the right to be angry with me. I have let them down, I have let my country down, and I have let myself down.
Okay, now what did you guys notice?
That she looks down a lot, and when she is not talking, her lips are very tight.
The crack in her voice, she's speaking a lot of pattern.
Anybody else want to share? Stress. Did you guys notice that that it felt different to watch her than to analyze her picture? I was watching a lot of your faces, and I saw like a lot of you just mirrored. Maybe that's what I'll do for the next talk, is like photograph you guys and be like, this is what you look like looking at the photo, and this is what you look like looking at the video. Like, you all had some cognitive empathy when you looked at the photo, but then when you see her, you feel it, you know, and when you feel it and look at the same time with your brain, you get a much more rich picture of what she's experiencing. Yeah.
A lot of times, I think when you hear a lot of athlete apologies, they're insincere, and it almost looks like it's staged, or they were instructed on what to say. But there's a level of sincerity in what she's saying, where she goes deeper than probably what she even had to do.
Yeah.
That it makes it hard to watch because it's real.
Yeah, it's true, and it's so powerful. There's a researcher named Amy Cuddy, and she writes a book about presence, and she talks about how when somebody is really present and authentic, everything they do matches, you know, and that authenticity you really see here, where everything matches, and it's not like, and that's what makes it so much more powerful and moving than something else. So with that, I want you guys to take a second to reflect. When do you actively use empathy in your work? And how does your work affect what a student might be feeling? And then how would you know? Are you looking at their faces? Is it from their tone of voice or some other reason, right? And then how would empathy for your colleagues serve you? So you guys have worksheets and you can fill it out, but since I want to get through a lot of content, you can have those for later, and then we can look. So if you want to jot notes down, you can, but I won't give you too much time to look at this, if that's okay. Okay, so the next technique after observation is just asking someone, interviewing. That's a really basic human technique. And you know, you can learn a lot by asking, how do you feel? And why do you feel that way? What's the context in which you feel that? So here, I had, I think, just a couple of days to redesign and build out a space for this woman here. And we got it done so quickly because she was on site with us, and we interviewed her about what her needs were, how she uses the space, and we could learn so much so quickly and do it right away. And then as we built things, yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. As we built things, you know, she could tell us and respond really quickly. So that was really helpful. And then a lot of times I interview people and I do a lot of preparation to understand, like, what do I want to know and how is this going to affect it? And that helps me be much more informed when I design. And being in her space was something that was really helpful because and watching her interact with the space was really helpful. And that helped me like adjust the design in the moment. So that's the next tool here, is really immersing yourself in someone's environment that you're designing for. So this is a snapshot from a project that I was doing where we were helping a social enterprise develop products to help homeless women have a source of income. And you know, I think when this project started, there were ideas of like, let's help the women reupholster furniture. And over time, as we got to know these women, as we got to spend time and share space with these women, we realized that these were upholstering furniture was not something that was a super appropriate project for someone who might be living out of their car. And we really shrunk the project down to little projects that could be made in a couple hours and then sold. And that helped us be much more successful in creating those projects. Another idea you can use to learn about what someone's going through is to prototype. So if you have some ideas that you're trying to think about, you can test them out and do a little test run. And here we're prototyping a little mobile experience that happens on your phone. And you would think, okay, I'm going to make a mobile prototype. I'm going to get coding. But you don't have to do that. Here, we just cut out a piece of cardboard and drew a phone on it and wrote some text on a paper and said, let's just test the experience as easily and quickly as we can so that we save our time for developing something we really believe in and know that works. And then this last approach here is co-design. So whereas here we came up with ideas and went and tested them, here we actually incorporated the users to help us design in the moment. So this is a group of where I went out with a group of people to design civic spaces for Culver City, and we were just walking around Culver City and found this really pleasant underpass. And we said, you know, we see a lot of people walking their dogs around here. Wouldn't it be great if this were a little dog park? And so the designers I was working with, they drew up this dog park. They talked to the people who are walking their dogs nearby, and they said, what would you like here? And they said, oh, we'd like a doggy bag dispenser here. That would make it really helpful for us. And then they could quickly see and iterate with them in the moment. So, and some of the reflections for this section are, how would you incorporate these techniques of interviewing, immersion, co-design, and prototyping in some of the ideas you guys are championing? And then who would you interview? You know, if you guys are teachers, if some of you who are teachers, would you interview the people who are in your classes and coming to your class? Or maybe you'd want to interview the people who are cutting your class and see what they're going through, what's stopping them. And so maybe you'd want to follow them home and see what's stopping them and immerse them, but not in a creepy way. And then, you know, what could you prototype? So, and then are there ways you can work with your students to improve your ideas? So these are some tools to think about. Now let's look at some of the tools. Like let's say you've done all of them. You really understand what your student is going through. How are you applying your empathy? And so here's some tools. And before we look at the tools, I want you to do a little thought experiment. So let's say I'm asking you to design a new water bottle, right? That's going to go on the shelf. Just take a second and think about what would I do to start this project? Anybody want to share?
Out there already.
Mm-hmm. What else? What else?
Get some mock designs and start to survey people, kind of get a feel for what's everyone.
Yep, see what's out there, mock designs, and get a feel. Yep.
Think about what you would like in a water bottle, maybe find out what other people would like that is not out there yet.
Yeah, at the beginning, your own frame of reference is where we start. Yep. Right.
Doing some surveying.
Surveying.
What people would like.
Seeing what they would like. That's right. So all of these are really valid approaches. What's that? Oh, yes.
I was just going to say you want to understand why they're buying the water and what would attract them to be attractive to them.
Yep. Of all of the responses, that's definitely my favorite approach to think about why people want to buy water. And it's really getting to the heart of, so you can think about the situation, you can think about what exists right now, but if it's not getting to the reason why people will do it, then people aren't going to want to buy it in the first place, right? So I think of this as like the first thing, like the most fundamental thing. Or is there a reason why somebody would want this? And this is really getting to the values that someone has and articulating it. And I was so pleased this morning to come in and see that you guys were all talking about your own values of why you came to Coastline and asking the 5 whys. So, you know, making sure you can like dig through that in everything you do and all of the ideas you're trying to champion, like having a really clear reason why somebody would want to do that. So in this project of water, I found five different reasons why people might buy water. And the first one, you think, oh, that's obvious. They want to stay alive. You know, that's one. That's vitality. And you might not think about it so immediately, but there were all these really other interesting reasons people bought water, which is something we really take so for granted. So you see these really colorful bottles up top. Maybe they're expressing this identity or this moment that's really fun for them. Or maybe they're buying something because there's like some really elite pleasure. So you see these Voss bottles are made out of glass and gray and feel really special. Maybe they want to connect with their family, or they want to have a nice party and have nice water here. So there are these larger bottles here. And then maybe they're kind of afraid of the water that comes out of the tap. And so you can imagine with all of these different values, you would design a completely different bottle, right? And so these were some of the guidelines that I put together to help my designers come up with more ideas that really hit at the why. And you can see they really span the difference. So if you want to like connect with people, you end up designing a bottle that's really friendly, casual, and you know, maybe has some attributes that kind of remind you of Disney and being together with your family. Whereas if you're afraid of your water, then it's completely different. You have different design cues, and maybe you're looking at taking design cues from Listerine. So so imagine like the values that students have when they come to Coastline, right? How are you designing something that's different if they're really focused on achieving their goals and feeling like a sense of mastery versus if they're coming to feel like they're part of a larger family, you know, versus something maybe they're coming to, you know, bring better opportunity for their family, right? So how does what you make change when you focus on each of these? Okay? So in this reflection, I'd like you to think about what are the deep values that bring students to Coastline, and then how have you gotten to those? Where does the Coastline experience honor these values, and then where do they fall short of these values? Okay, so that's values, which are things that are really deep and stable over time. And then as you design things, maybe you want to look at modes, which are things that are more transient and things that you might feel in the moment, right? So I want you guys to all think back to the dinner you ate last night. How many of you guys got to choose what you ate for dinner? Okay, so most of you got to choose. And think about what you chose to eat. Now, what you chose to eat, what drove your decision to choose what you chose to eat? Does somebody want to share? Laziness? Uh-huh. What ingredients? Yep. Okay. Oh, that's great. Okay, the healthiest choice. Oh, some things so that you guys can all be eating together. Uh-huh. Anybody else want to share? Leftovers. So that's like the easiest thing. It's here and it's kind of economical. Yeah. Okay. So you want to make sure like you're not wasting a chance to enjoy your meal. Yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, I think at any given point, we've all felt lazy. We've all felt like we want to enjoy our meal. We've all wanted to do something healthy and feel responsible, you know? And you can translate this feeling into things that you can design for. So this is modes. So these are some what we called food moods, but modes of when people eat. So on projects where we're thinking, oh, we need to design food or we need to design something for the diet, we also want to consider how are people feeling and what mood are they in when they're trying to find something to eat. So we talked about the responsible, trying to get something that's healthy. something that's easy, people who were talking about lazy or just leftovers, and then the experiential back there of wanting to something that they know they're going to enjoy. And then nobody talked about trying to drown their sadness in food. So I'm really happy to hear that. Nobody was in that. So that's good. So that's modes, and you can imagine you'd cook different dinners for people depending on what mode they were in. So if that's how they feel in a specific moment, journeys are trying to understand how people feel over time. So you guys have a great start of a journey here in the student life cycle, right? You have all of the steps that are happening before, during, and after, and maybe you could even come up with steps that happen in between that aren't captured here to double click and get more detail. And so with this, you can imagine maybe it'd be interesting to look at this and think about where are the highs and lows of this journey? Where are students really feeling great, and where are some points that are a little more problematic? And here's an example of how you might graph that out, right? So this is a journey of the experience of buying life insurance. Just curious, has anybody here bought life insurance before? Okay. Did you like it? No, it's not that fun, which is why I was hired to work on this and think about how to make it better. And by interviewing people, understanding their journey, and mapping out what they saw, how they felt over the journey, we came up with this overall journey. And we noticed, as you can see graphically, that your experience is really radically different if you have an agent versus if you don't. So this green part, I have an agent, I trust my agent, they help me, and overall I feel responsible, and it's pretty helpful. And then we notice, if you don't have an agent, you have these really low lows, like I don't understand what the terms are, and I feel confused. And everybody's happy once it's over, but when they bought the insurance. But then insurance is this really weird product where it's a product that you buy and you hope you never have to use it. And so if you don't have an agent to remind you why you've bought it, then you're just sending money to this thing, and it just feels really rotten. And so with this company, we tried to look at okay, maybe these lows are moments where we want to really focus our attention. And maybe these highs are moments where we really want to emphasize that something great has happened and amplify. So maybe that's an exercise that you guys might want to try doing in your breakouts in the next couple of days. So let's say you identify where these moments are. Here's 2 examples that I thought are really good examples and experiences that hit people when they have a high and low moment. So has anybody not used Google Maps? Okay, Google Maps. So, okay. So in Google Maps, they know that when you use their product, a really sucky moment is when you get there and the place is closed. And they also know, hey, we know when everything closes. Why don't we just tell them right before that happens, hey, you might not want to do this, that place is closed, right? So I think this is can be really delightful and save people a lot of trouble, right? And then Facebook, they also have a lot of, so much experience about people talking about what they're feeling, right? And they have seen enough, and they have enough data to know what words and phrases are signaling that someone is feeling suicidal. And so when somebody's feeling suicidal, they have decided to implement this feature that will say, oh, you've written something that seems a little troubling. Do you want help? And empowers them to reach out to the hotline or to reach out to their friends or find information. So I think knowing where these really key moments are and what people might be going through can be really powerful. And so these are examples that use a lot of data and digital technology, but here's an example that's a little more low tech. So this is a picture of the poolside of the Magic Castle Hotel in Los Angeles. And it's this like okay hotel, but you know, there are these moments where they think, okay, a lot of people are coming to Los Angeles and it's kind of special for them to be in a pool. So how can we amplify that? And they created this popsicle hotline that you pick up, and when you want it, they come and bring it. And they take this moment, and this person who's wearing like white gloves is bringing you a popsicle, and it feels amazing, right? So I'd love for you guys to reflect on like how you would map the student journey before, during, and after Coastline, you know, what someone's feeling. What are the highs and lows that you feel like you can improve? And then how would you connect these ideas back to the deep values that we talked about earlier? Right? And then are there technologies, either digital or otherwise, that you can use to meet the needs, not just deep ones, but the ones in the moment? Right? By the way, how's my pace? Am I going too fast or too slow? Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so up until now, we've been really focusing on like how we meet the needs of the end user, how we have empathy for the end user. But since you guys are all in these amazing cross-functional groups, I also wanted to take a second to think about a tool to help you work with how everybody feels, how your colleagues feel about each other. And one of the tools I like to use is called a stakeholder map. And this is really looking at like, okay, what am I feeling? What's my situation? And then how do I graph out like what somebody else is going through so that we can find the overlap, right? So, I mean, I think you guys do this naturally in your head when you try and work with people, but sometimes it's nice to make a thing or an artifact that everyone can look at so you can all get on the same page about what you're all going through. So if you Google stakeholder map, there's lots of really beautiful ways to do this. There's like overlapping circles and concentric circles and the spider diagram and 2x2s. You know, I think really there's no one right way to do it. It's more just trying to find what accurately captures the situation you're in. So I have this really simple one that was that's in an Excel spreadsheet, you know, and just this is a stakeholder map that I did for helping a software company come up with their product vision and trying to get everybody on the same page on what do you need out of a vision and who's this vision for anyway? And so it was just like a list of all the different groups that we were trying to target, the representative people in each group, and so I scrubbed everyone's name out, but here's me in the center. What's their success criteria? What requirements do they have? What constraints? What format do they want to see this vision in? And then what kind of questions would they have, right? And just making a list really helped me appreciate how different we are, right? So if you look at me, I said my success criteria is user happiness. And I want to make sure that our product is doing right by society. And my constraint is I don't want to creep anyone out. And I thought this was so obvious, like, this is what I want, let's just keep moving. But doing this exercise really helped me step back and say, you know what, sales, they are not as interested in those things. They're more they appreciate that I'm interested in those things, but they really just wanted clarity so that when they sold the product, they know their customers can say, okay, I know what I'm getting, I know what I'm buying. And so I think this can be a really helpful tool to step back and say, okay, I know exactly what I would want to do, what's right for me, but let me make sure and do a gut check with everyone else and make sure they're on the same page. So take a moment to reflect. Who do you have to work with to get something done? And what does success look like for each person? Is it really different? Is it really, really similar? And then if it's really different, where are you going to find the overlaps? So this idea of overlaps has really been helpful for me. So when we did this map, it was like, there were some places where we said, oh, that's really far apart. That's going to be out of scope. We're not going to find common ground. And then there were times where I said, well, in this context, we can compromise on that. And then in other places, we said, oh, okay, I want to really collaborate. So really mapping things out and reflecting on these things helps you decide how you want to approach finding the right idea. Okay, so that's reflection. Now we'll talk about framing, which is like, where am I going to use? What problem am I going to solve? And I really love this quote, which is, if I had an hour to spend to solve on a problem, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And like, funny side story is that supposedly that gets attributed all the time to Albert Einstein, but I also read that it's probably more likely an engineering professor at Yale in the 60s. But nonetheless, it holds true. I think this quote has become more and more relevant in my career as the projects I've taken on have grown in complexity and the stakeholders have become more and more diverse. Then you really need to invest time to say, okay, what problem are we trying to solve here in the first place? So having a problem statement here is really helpful, and sometimes it takes longer depending on your situation. So in workshops, I'll have this really vague statement of combat obesity by getting America's young adults to eat better, and then have people talk about, well, what does that mean to them? And does this really feel actionable? Like, it feels actionable to everyone, but when they all get together and show their solutions, it's like they've thrown a bunch of spaghetti on the wall. It's all over the place. So having a really clearly defined problem statement saves you that time of doing all these ideas and just starting from a common point of view. So I was looking through some materials Shelley gave me, and I thought this was like a really amazing reframe of what we're doing here, where traditionally community colleges have been focusing on increasing access to courses. But really we're here because we've noticed like that's not the problem that's really going to turn the needle at this point. We really want to give access to programs. So I thought this was a great reframe. And so as you're writing these problem statements, I think what we're really trying to do is calibrate on this thing called altitude, right? I think designers, we really like to focus on what's the situation we're designing, what mood is someone in, and let's figure that out, right? I think what's really special about being here today is that this whole retreat is something that's been really focused on designing and solving for the organization. We're all coming together on this higher level moment of like, how can we help our organization reach our mission better? So the values and modes really help us get to the inner landscape and then think about the situation, the organization. And then in this culture like of limited access to education, like how is the solution gonna improve that? So if we think about all of these together, you end up getting a little bit more of an engaging experience. So I'd like you guys, some of the things to reflect on are, at what altitude are you usually flying? Do you usually like to think about like what the student really cares about? Do you like to think about what situation they're in? Are you thinking more on an organizational level, or are you trying to like, improve the overall culture? This last section is really putting it all together. How do we put everything we've learned together? And as I was saying, when you put it all together, you get some really nice experiences. So here's Starbucks. The experience of working at Starbucks. It's a really nice experience. Like, you need a place to work, and there's this place, this company whose strategy is completely designed around getting you to hang out there. And you might be hungry, and you say, you know what, I'm kind of feeling lazy. I'm just going to get a food. So their food products are designed to eat really simply without too much trouble. And then we're in this culture where we really prize and identify the work that we do and identify with our work. And so people can be a little bit of workaholics, and they really value the ability to be productive. And so when all of these come together, you end up getting, and everything agrees, like back to what I was saying about authenticity, like when everything agrees, you get a really good experience. Another example here is hailing a Lyft. This is when you need a car, you use your phone and someone drives up and gives you a ride. And you know, when I'm going to an airport, I'm just feeling really rushed. I don't want to park. I don't want to think too hard about it. And we live in this culture where everybody has a digital phone. People are willing to drive a car as a gig, and a lot of people aren't interested in owning a car anymore. And so this culture really enables a company like Lyft to provide this on-demand service. And the value it really brings is when I use Lyft, I feel like I'm more free, I have more time, and I have less constraints. And so that makes it like a much more, like a good experience for me. And then I'll show you the most recent thing I've designed is this talk. And I really tried to think about all of these different levels for you guys. Like, you know, from what I can tell, you guys are a bunch that are really committed to serving students, and because you want like things to be equitable, you know, and I really wanted to empower that. So here we are at the start of a 2-day retreat, and I wasn't sure what mode you guys would be in. Maybe you're learning, so I wanted to put a lot of rich content and tools that you could use. Maybe some people would be really skeptical and critical, and I wanted to have a lot of personal stories and interactivity to make sure to try and sway you if you did. Or maybe you were seeking, you wanted to know, all right, that's great, but how does this work for me? So we have some reflection. So I hope that those things work to engage you in this talk today. Oh, and then as I mentioned, you're organizationally investing in guided pathways. So I want you guys to think about, as you develop your ideas, like how are your ideas hitting all of these levels? And the tools that we've talked about really help you gain more empathy at each level. So we have, you know, I've talked a lot about the values, and you can get those values in interviewing. In the situation, the journey maps and modes helps you understand how someone might be feeling over a certain situation. And then prototyping and co-designing helps you design for those situations. And then the stakeholder map helps you make sure you're designing not just for the end user, but for your entire organization. And then maybe there's a larger culture that you can observe and immerse yourself in if you need to know more about that. So with that, that's about what I have for you. I'd really like to thank you for being here. There's time to take a couple questions too. Mike.
Yeah, let's do questions, and then I'm going to work on switching the laptop while you're doing that.
Sounds good. Yes?
So when you design something, I know at some point it helps to take like an individual. Okay, let's look at, you know, Mr. X, or let's look at, you know, this person. At what stage of the whole design process do you think is best to address that? You know, because if you get early on, you might get too focused on just those specific scenarios.
I mean, I think so the question was, when's the best time to focus on one person to design for your specific user? And I think it really depends on the project and what the existing knowledge you have already. So I've worked in projects like life insurance where the clients, like, they don't know very much about their users. Well, maybe not that particular life insurance companies, but other life insurance companies or other insurance companies. They don't know very much, and they don't have a strong foundation of understanding the culture. And life insurance is not something that you buy every day. And so it's helpful to focus on someone right then and there. If, let's say, you have a lot of experience, like, I feel like, I'm not totally sure about this, but I think Steve Jobs is like really a lead user, and he lived and breathed it. And he said, you know what, I want to try and start with my intuition first and make something and then test it later. And so I think that it depends on how much you know already and how confident you feel in your solution. If you feel really confident and you're willing to risk that your idea might fail once you test it with somebody, and then you may find out that it's not right or it's right for them, and it's more of a gamble. So it's like safer to test and to learn more in the beginning and focus on the beginning, but you can do it later and just see if it works. Sure. Yeah.
Maybe to add to that, it's probably a good idea always to have like a framework, a model of how to do these things, the things that you want. Once you have a model, then you can customize it to each student based on the situation they're in.
So is that a comment? Is that?
I just added to the comment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely it's really nice to have organization and like conceptual models. But I always hesitate to say always because I've seen times where people are, people are intuitive and they try it and it works. So it's just a mix. If you're lucky, your intuition works. If you are not so sure, having a model that everybody agrees on and is proven, that can really like help an organization and a team build confidence that the solution is the right one and is going to work. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
It sounds like we're talking possibly of situations that may fall into two different buckets or two different spectrums. One is when we might want to ask people, give them information about experience and what would they think, because we want them, based on what their current knowledge is, to give us feedback. But at the same time, I like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs didn't rely on that because he would have never got the iPod and the iPhone and everything else. Or the other is this a project that we think the end user doesn't know how it needs to be? They don't know medicine and science. If you ask them what they wanted, they're not going to pick the thing that's going to not be fun, but it's going to be. So it may be in two different categories, and we can decide which one are we in. Are we in the one we're asking them because we want to know their feedback and what it's like, or are we in the one that they don't know, so we're going to try something unique and different?
Steve, so the difference is that Steve Jobs was like a power user. He was someone who had like a lot of experience being at the forefront of what people needed. And the other difference is that Steve Jobs had incredible amounts of power over lots of people. So he could kind of do that and everybody would have to follow along. So it depends on how much power you believe you have and how much confidence everybody has in your ideas. Like, because Steve Jobs was Steve Jobs, they said, well, Steve Jobs said so. So he had a lot of credibility. And he had a lot of credibility and his ideas worked. If you don't have a lot of credibility and you have a lot of people that are working with you and you need to meet a lot of constraints and it's kind of costly to fail, then you probably want to go more the conservative route. Yes?
But I don't think it's one or the other. You know, I think all of us in this room have a lot of knowledge about students, and I think it'll be interesting to share because we all have different facets, different areas of experience with students. But at the same time, the innovation is about intuition as well, right? That's maybe informed by that knowledge. Trying something that may not have been tried before. And it's worth a try. And the question is, do they have the power? I think that's why they're here. Is we're giving them the power to really design, both from intuition, from knowledge, and from experience.
That's a great, great point. Thank you.
Jane, you said in the introduction that you were a design researcher and a design strategist. Could you just talk a little bit more about those roles? I just thought they were kind of fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so design researcher is really someone who's in charge of leading the research, doing the insights, interviewing, understanding someone, and that usually culminates in a report that tells people, this is what we learned, this is some insights, and it might have some guidelines on what to design. A design strategist uses that, starts from that, but also focuses on like the whole thing. Like, this isn't what is just good for the end user, but we think that the business should do this way. The business should invest in this. I guess a design strategist finds the overlap between what the business needs and then what a user needs. And design research is more focused on the user. Yep. Cool. Well, we're about at time. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention, and I really wish you the very best over these next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank Thank you so much, Jenny. So awesome. Lots to think about and process in our brains, right?